Okay, I'm going to go to a guest. I've got Thahoketoteh. I don't know how well I did with your name, so I'm hoping. Let me get a line here. All right, there. Are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I don't know how much I butchered your name. I tried to do the best I could. Um,
That's good. It was good.
all right. Again, I talked about a little bit in the first segment about you coming on. Degarundage Paul Delarone, he was in studio a few weeks ago, mentioned this. And, of course, I get Gontaneta Horn's emails from Mohawk Nation News, and so I followed this a little bit. But I will admit that I'm not totally familiar with exactly what transpired. But from what I understand, you brought some sort of legal action within the Canadian court system, challenging their failure to uphold. You challenged their failure to follow rule of law, basically, but specifically terms of the Royal Proclamation of 1763. Is that right?
Actually, when I went in, my original action was based on the Royal Proclamation of 1784, which provided protection for the Mohawks, for them and their posterity forever. And it was signed by a Captain General, which is the highest-ranking general in the history of the British military, and he had the power to make proclamations as the king, so that's why it's a royal proclamation. So that was my original action. Now we're in the appeal process, and I just go back to the Royal Proclamation 1763, and I rely upon that, and as well as the Royal Proclamation. It's rule of law we're talking about, which provides that a Royal Proclamation supersedes all Admiralty statutes. People don't know what that is. Admiralty statutes are corporate bylaws, really. What they are is, they even say on all your laws in the United States and Canada, they say, this shall have the force as if it was law. None of them are law. They're all statutes. It's corporate bylaws is what it is. But anyways, a Royal Proclamation supersedes all Admiralty statutes, which is all law in Canada. So that was my argument about rule of law. And it's getting quite interesting now.
Well, I mean, so what is the, and I know they use all kinds of certain words in court. So what is it that you're praying for? And without trying to sound like I'm a religious zealot here or something, but
no, that's right. That's one of their legal terms.
What are you praying for in your in your action?
Well, originally when I put in my action, and then they put in a motion to have my action dismissed. So I put in a motion to defend that motion, and went and defend that motion in an oral argument. And then the decision they made, now I'm the prothonotary, I think I told you this before, which is like a magistrate in your court.
Sure.
He made a decision, which was illegal, the decision that he made, but he also put in a little thing saying that I cannot appeal his decision.
Now, what was the decision that he made?
Well, I was asking for a rule of law to be followed, and the Attorney General of Canada was arguing. He was saying that the federal court didn't have the jurisdiction to deal with the things that I was asking for in their statute. I'm saying that none of their statutes count, in rule of law, including that one, right? But anyways, so he agreed with everything that I said in the argument about their law coming from Gwich'wantala. I held up the two-row in their court. My grandson was in the audience, and I'm sure he'll tell his grandchildren about that, which I'm very proud of. But I held up the two-row, and I told them, all of your law comes from this. This is it. This is rule of law here, in Onawaraga, in Great Turtle Island. So anyways, that's how I started my argument. And he agreed, the prothonotary, he agreed with everything that I said, because he had to. I only told the truth. But then he said, but he also agrees with the Attorney General that the federal court doesn't have jurisdiction, so he does strike the motion on those grounds. And he says, and he leaves no leave to amend, which means you can't appeal, but in their own rules, he can't do that. So, anyways, instead, what I did in my appeal, I just went in and I said, forget everything else I asked for, which is why they're doing this, because of everything that I asked for. I said I asked to change my prayer for relief. This is their words that you said earlier, but that's what they use. Prayer for relief. I changed to you answer me one constitutional question. And in the Constitution Act of 1867, Canada has to abide by all royal proclamations previous to that Royal Proclamation 1763 and 1784, the one that I was relied upon. So if you are a legal country who follows rule of law, then do you follow your own law? I mean, one question. This is all. So I've left that down, and I've said make it a written argument, and that's it. So I don't know how they can answer this question, but however they answer it, it's going to be good for us.
Well, and the bottom line is, I sense that they feel like you're trying to entrap them in by ruling in favor of one thing and realizing that they're opening the door to being vulnerable on a whole host of other issues.
I'm sure that is it. And, who knows what type of games they play, and it's all games. It's all theater, these courts. I mean, they're all theater, these Admiralty courts.
Well, see, and here's what I don't understand, and because there is some distinction between the legal system in Canada and the legal system in the United States. The bottom line is we never participated in the U.S. courts on this side. In fact, the U.S. courts didn't even allow Native people, as far as they were concerned, we didn't have standing to appear in court, and that didn't change until fairly recently. I mean, so it is a little bit confusing because when they mention you in their laws, when their Constitution cites you specifically, although I understand to some extent that when you consider how things are stated in the U.S. Constitution, the U.S. Constitution mentions us, but it never includes us. It includes us by name, but not within their within their rule of law or within their constitutional authority.
There was an illegal act put through in 1871 in the U.S. called the Appropriations Act. You know about that?
Yeah, every piece of legislation that they've passed since their U.S. Constitution, where they tried to assert legislative authority, there's no foundation. And this is one of the things that Terry Nelson had said. You show me the one document, and he said this in the Canadian courts, and I've said the same thing here. You show me one document that can substantiate subjugation of our people to under the U.S. or the Canadian constitutions, and there is none.
No, nor in Canada. People think they have a constitution. They don't. No one has ever stood up and sworn allegiance to it because it doesn't exist. It has never been ratified. They only pretend they have it. And then even in the courts, I went into a OMB hearing, which is the Province of Ontario Municipal Board, about all these windmills they want to put up in Gandigoda, which I already let them fully know, including the Chief of the General Staff of Her Majesty's Worldwide Armies in London. They're sick of hearing from me. But anyways, I let them all know that all of Gandigoda, 6 miles at the source of the Grand River, this is ours forever, and you need to protect it. And so my whole case is based on this one thing, their duty to protect us. So this is a good thing. And like I say, I can't see, I can't see there being any bad answer here for us.
Well, and I'm among those people who feel a little less strongly about being protected by them
protecting us from themselves.
No, and that's what I'm understand. I mean, I guess that's the way. I guess the way I would explain it is more so that they have no legal authority to cause us injury, and I guess that's and I realize that's the way. But that's the way people manipulate the wording, and I don't want to make it sound like that we're somehow subordinate to them or to their protection, because that's what I'm saying, that doesn't exist in any of their laws, and it doesn't matter how many times they rule against us or how many laws they pass that try to infringe upon our sovereignty. And see, here's the thing that I wanted to get back on the Canadian side. I guess one of the things that's got to be a little different in the United States, when these white men decided they were gonna fight against the king, fight against the crown, they had to find a means to for a legal rationale for that Declaration of Independence, and they got it from us. They got the whole concept from us about inalienable rights, about inherent rights, about birthright, about sovereignty being a birthright, not being bestowed by God to the crown. and or to the throne. That's the difference, and I'm wondering if that transfer of sovereignty or power on the Canadian side is a little bit different path, because Canada is based on being getting their authority from Great Britain. Great Britain was based on sovereignty being vested with the crown, not with any of the people.
I remember it a little bit differently than you, although we're both Mohawks, so we'll have the same memories. DNA is memory. But the American Revolution was nothing more than an attack on the peace at Onondaga. I mean, it was just a couple little, what are they, false flag events, if you will, from that first thing in Boston, right through Washington's biggest army when he crossed the Delaware was, he finally had 1,000 men to go fight some paid Hessians that were, the king paid them for part of the show. And then the next year, all of a sudden, you got General Sullivan with 12,800 heavily armed, just like in that movie Avatar, coming through New York State, coming in to put out the fire at Onondaga, destroy the peace forever, and turn it into the Constitution of War. That's what the American Constitution is, the Constitution of War. That's why it never stops.
Well, but the problem with all that is that there were a fair number of even Haudenosaunee people that were feeding them all this information, how they could make. See, at the end of the day, what their declaration was based on was trying to make a statement to the rest of the world how they could justify, because there was no legal avenue in the eyes of white men to break away in this way. So they got that stuff from us. I'm not saying that they were loyal or faithful to us. I'm not suggesting that for a second. And don't forget, most of Sullivan's campaign was wreaked upon the Senecas, not the Onondagas. Hey, look,
right to Onondaga to put out the fire, and they stole everything. They did. They still have all that stuff, and they made the Constitution of War. They just took the Council of Women, made it into the Senate, the Council of Men into the Congress. Then they put a hierarchical president over top of the whole thing. So the whole thing is, really a pale comparison to Guyana Red Goa.
Well, and again, I've never suggested they got some basic principles, but it was more about trying to divest the sovereignty from the crown, and that's what they got from us. It had nothing to do with their governmental structure. Look, I've got to take a break here. I take a break every quarter of the hour, so I'm going to take a break here at the bottom of the hour. If you want to stay with us, we'll talk about this a little bit more, and we'll get some of the folks in studio to participate. But this is John Kane, and this is Let's Talk Native, and we'll be right back.
Here is the newest voice on the new voice, a new choice, KB 1520. Let's Talk Native host, John Kane.
All right, thanks for coming back. This is John Kane, and this is Let's Talk Native. I do have a guest on the line. I've got Thahoketoteh on the phone. He is he is a Mohawk like myself. We're kind of in the minority in this room. I'm surrounded by Senecas, and my son, who is in the room, who's Oneida. But I have in studio Matt Hill, Ross John, and Ed Schindler, and again the guest on the phone. Tell me this: what do you anticipate coming out of the legal action that you have begun, and do you think they will manage to kind of just sweep this under the rug by declaring that they don't have jurisdiction to rule on any of these issues, or do you think you'll have some sustenance on this?
Well, ideally, for me, that's why I say I don't see any bad decision they can make, because we want to take it to the highest court in the country, to the top appeal court, and have the discussion right there anyways. So really, if these people did make the right decision for us now, this federal court, then the Attorney General would probably appeal it through the Appeals Superior Court anyway, right? So either way, I don't think we're going to have, and like I said, I've just reduced it down to one simple question. They have to answer that question. Will they answer it? Maybe they won't. And what? We're all waiting.
But if the one question is, do they govern by rule of law? They almost have to say yes to that. But then what?
Well, then I guess what happens after that. Well, this is something that needs to be thought about. But I know that I'm going to just immediately take that order, what I get, to the sheriff's office and go have the finance minister of this country, Jim Flaherty, evicted from his home that he built on my claim. That's the first thing I'm going to do with it. The sheriff, I'm going to get to do that. We've all been through that. I mean, growing up in Toronto, I remember the sheriff coming and kicking me out, locking me out of my own house. Well, I'm going to do that to the finance minister when I get the decision.
Well, I wish you well in that endeavor. I know that usually, no matter what, they manipulate their laws to suit themselves, and
Yep.
they rarely position themselves. Even when they blow a bunch of smoke up our butts on this stuff, they manage to manipulate the laws in such a way that they are usually. I mean, think about think about certain things that are said so clearly. I mean, even in the United States, for instance, with the Canandaigua Treaty, and I'm not a fan of any of these things. And the only reason I ever cite Canandaigua Treaty is because there's one line in there where they specifically talk about the lands of the Six Nations, and they specifically say that, especially relating to the Senecas, that the land is Seneca land, and the United States will never claim the same. I mean, to suggest that the United States will never claim our lands, and yet they will try to assert authority. They will try to legislate. I mean, we're in a battle down here often, and in fact, we've been talking about it even on the show last week. We're constantly in a battle with how we deal with outside law enforcement, not just when they're trying to investigate things like when they bring their federal agents onto our territories. And in this year, we've had raids on the Tonawanda territory, and we had one recently in Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation. But we also have this interplay with the local law enforcement, the sheriffs and the state police, and we've had these battles, and we establish policy, and then policy gets relaxed, and the next thing you know, we've got these guys spilling into our territories, and frankly, they create an environment where it isn't even about real investigation. You get a couple of cowboys who think, well, I'm a cop, I can do whatever I want to do, and at the end of the day, their laws manage to protect them. Although, having said that, there was one circumstance back in '97 when we were battling New York State over taxes, where the state police came into Onondaga and disrupted a very peaceful demonstration, if you will. It wasn't even a demonstration. It was more they were doing a tobacco burning and doing a few things like that along the Interstate 81, and the state police shut off the highway and then came in with a riot squad and arrested about 20 or 30 people, I think, roughed up a bunch of people. And now the state is trying to settle a lawsuit. And now they're not even trying to settle a lawsuit with just those that were arrested or roughed up. They're actually trying to settle a lawsuit with everybody that was there for having their civil rights violated. So so there is precedent where you get these law enforcement agents with their backs against the wall, but then they're just gonna pay their way out of it.
Yeah, that's unfortunately how the political and legal systems work in both the United States and Canada. Totally corrupt, all on bribes. That's unfortunate. But, my grandfather, my seventh-generation grandfather, was Ida Wogan, one of the four kings who visited Queen Anne's court in London. And, when he came back, he said about the British, he said, they rely on the written word. It is how they will be judged. And I remember it like I said it myself. And that's why I did all this in the first place, because no one else has, and you know what? Let's judge them with their own words. So.
Well, and I know that's where I think you and I oftentimes would find ourselves on a different path. To me, I'm trying to take everything out of the written word and say, look, we're human beings, and the first thing that we have is we have the gift of communication in terms of speaking to each other, instead of trying to twist around what the written word really means. And I see people that try to hang so much on the written word, our own people as well as non-native people. And to me, I don't want a legal issue out of most of this stuff. I want this to be about which is more consistent with the Garinagoa, which is where we find we travel a path to resolve conflicts, not try to resolve conflicts in their courts of law. One of the things when the UN DRIP, the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, was being rejected by U.S. and Canada, part of the reason both those countries rejected it was because they were concerned about how much a new standard in international law was going to affect international law, and how much it was going to, they would find their own constitutions and their own laws in violation of the Declaration.
That's what we're doing here together, aren't we? What I'm doing here and what you're doing there.
Well, but the point was that and I was actually at a hearing in Washington. In fact, Ross John, who is one of my guests here, he was with me. We actually went to one of these consultations put on by the State Department, and what they kept saying is, we don't want anything to interfere with their existing remedy for native conflict. And they kept saying that over and over again. And finally, I asked the panel. I said, "What are you talking about? What are you claiming to be the remedy?" And they said, "Court." I said, "Well, how could the remedy be court if we've only been even allowed standing to enter your courts, and your courts have no ability to really rule on issues of sovereignty? You only can rule on the things that are within your law. And if we're a sovereign entity that exists outside of your law, then your courts can't deal with those things." And of course, I left them a little bit stunned without an answer. And the point was that's why your courts are meaningless to us. And it's not just about not having jurisdiction. That's not even the argument. It's that it's not the appropriate place to deal with these issues.
And it boils right down to the same thing about the border. The corporate border, that's what it is. What we noticed after that American Revolution, all they did is put up the pretend border, call one side Canada, the other side United States. The same 13 bloodline families running both sides. Nothing ever changed. I mean,
well, but one of the problems that exists with some of these things, just like with the treaties in general, is that we have too many of our own people who get lulled into a false sense of security on what on what these papers mean. How many? I mean, they were even putting Article 3 of the Jay Treaty on the red cards, for crying out loud. I mean, we weren't even a party to that thing. Why would we promote the Jay Treaty as something that really offered us any protection? Because it really didn't. It just threw us into the mix of that conversation. But it was a conversation between two white men. It wasn't a conversation with us. And in most of these treaties, it's like Degarundage says, the Mohawk word for treaty talks to about really comes from the definition is about what we give our land up for. Because at the end of the day, every one of these things was some sort of fraudulent land deal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I want to thank you for joining me on the show. You'll have to keep me posted on where this thing goes and what opportunities you see to push the agendas that you're fighting for and the issues that you're fighting for and that many of us are fighting for. Yeah. I'm interested in seeing where this thing goes. If you speak to Thahoketoteh, you tell her I said hello. And I know that your stuff gets posted on her Mohawk Nation News and that you participate with her in some of those.
Yes, I do, yeah.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to come in here, come online with us and talk about these issues and spread the word about the show. I am trying to address more issues on both sides of the imaginary line because we're in the same battle here, and we're really trying to assert our birthright and not and really nothing more than that. So I appreciate you participating with me.
Thank you too.
All right, thanks.
No.
No.